5 Alex Haskell. I'm Jock Plum, serving as your 2026 Missoula Organization of Realtors President. We appreciate everybody joining us in person as well. We have a lot of people online today. Full report is live on our website now, and a full recording of today's presentation will soon be available at MissoulaRealEstate.com. The slides that we're going to be showing today in the presentation are pulled directly from the full report, but interactive versions are available under the Market Data tab. So you can sort and customize the data in a number of different ways to pull out the information that best supports your objectives. So whether you're a consumer in development, lending, planning, brokerage, or public service, the tools are built for you to interact with directly for your needs. I think it's a great feature, and it's important to highlight what a powerful tool it is for the community. A tremendous amount of work goes into creating this report. I wanted to thank the MOR staff, Delia Dowse, Sonia McCloney, and Bree Hoffman for ongoing support and collaboration. And a special shout out to our interim CEO and Government Affairs Director, Jeff Leroy. Our presenters today are Mandy Snook, Chair of the Data Committee and Realtor, Brent Wahlberg, Realtor, Julie Pavlish, representing subsidized housing, Matt Gare, lender, Paul Forsting, senior planner, Derek Sheehan, economist, and myself speaking to residential rental data. And thank you to the rest of the data committee for their continued work behind the scenes. Gwen Refuse, Director of HUD Programs, Andrew Connor, University of Montana Analytics, Jason Schroeder, Realtor, and Brittany Palmer, representing land trusts. So the first slide we have is the housing continuum slide. The slide represents the full housing spectrum in Western Montana, from unsheltered housing all the way through to market rate ownership. Today's report covers data from supporting housing and moves through the full market rate spectrum. The goal is to provide a complete picture of how each segment connects on to the next. Couple changes in reporting this year. First off, in the next slide, Delia. Sales data continues to be pulled from the Missoula urban area. This is not county-wide. It includes Greater Missoula, Lolo, East Missoula, Bonner, and Clinton. And the supply data has been expanded this year to reflect the Missoula County planning areas. So this includes Seeley Lake, the Y, Frenchtown, West Valley, and Target Big Flat. These adjustments give us a more accurate and meaningful view of both demand and supply across the region. So I'll turn it over to Mandy. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay, as Josh mentioned, we're using static slides this year that we've pulled from the website. You can go to MissoulaRealEstate.com and toggle the buttons for more specific data. The data I'm discussing today is sales in the Missoula urban area. In 2024, our home price across all types of units, single family, townhomes, condominiums, manufactured homes on owned lots, was $562,400. $562,400, and we had 984 closed sales. In 2025, our median has seen a modest adjustment to $550,000, a decrease of 2.2%. You may recall that we had an increased number of closed sales last year in 2024, the first time we've seen that since 2020. That increase has continued into 2025, and we closed the year at 1,029 units sold, an increase of 4.6%. In short, pace and volume of sales are still gaining momentum, while the median price in 2025 showed a modest adjustment. If we break down the median prices of all unit types in 2025, single-family homes closed at $584,000. Townhomes were $497,950. Condos were $343,750. And manufactured homes on owned land was $366,000. In 2024, we said our theme was stabilization of the market, and that trend has carried through in 2025. We saw a couple of years of quickly rising prices during the pandemic and decreased sales volume. A period of stabilization is typical as markets return to balance. Looking at how volume and price work together are important. As after the housing bubble in 2009, we saw both prices and volume decrease. Now we see the opposite. Volume has increased while prices have stabilized. It's more of a normalization of activity. More homes are selling. They're concentrated in slightly more attainable price points. The shift where buyers are active is what influences the median. Our neighborhood slide from the sales dashboard at MissoulaRealestate.com pulls in every neighborhood from the Missoula urban area and shows sales volume from 2020 as well as median home price. This year, to make it easier to see, we pulled the neighborhoods that represent roughly half of all sales in the urban area and represent the highest volume of areas in the market. So why did the median home price dip a little? It really comes down to where the activity was. We saw more homes selling in the $400,000 to $600,000 range, with slightly fewer in the $600,000 to $800,000. We still saw growth in price points over 1 million. These neighborhoods show some of these changes. The Grant Creek, Butler Creek area saw an uptick in values and a decreased number of sales. Lower Miller Creek has one of the higher transaction counts each year, and these sales stayed pretty steady. We saw the median price in Lewis and Clark, Lolo, Setupquin, and Southgate decline slightly and the number of sales increase. The Setupquin-Mullen area continues to be a neighborhood carrying the most sales in the Missoula urban area. Franklin to the Fort tends to be an attainable neighborhood with primarily older homes. The median increased and we saw decreased sales there. While this trend didn't exist in every neighborhood, we did want to bring up these examples where slowing sales volume resulted in rising median prices, and where expanded sales activity resulted in more normalization, stabilization of the median price. This slide is showing the percent of sales by financing method. People are interested every year how many cash sales we're having in the Missoula area. And this year, they continued to stay pretty steady, another sign of a normalizing market. This year, we were about 26%. But what's more interesting are seller concessions. Our list price ratio across all home types in 2025 was about 97%. So we didn't see large price cuts on sale prices. Instead, we're seeing negotiating coming in the form of seller concessions. About 45% of sales in 2025 had sellers offering concessions, not much of a change from 2024. What did change is that those sales with concessions, we saw the median what did change is those sales that had concessions, we saw the median concession at $5,275 in 2024, and a 52% increase in seller paid closing costs in 2025. So more negotiating is happening in the market, and the vehicle is seller concessions. Oh, and with that, I'm going to pass it on to Matt Gare.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm here today to talk to you about the Housing Affordability Index. For those that are unfamiliar, this index is essentially a single number that is designed to represent housing affordability. It is functionally a comparison between median income and median monthly payment on a house. What percentage of income is being allocated towards housing cost? 30% of your gross pre-tax income is considered to be affordable by the federal government, and that is the metric that we have used here today. A couple of key figures to look at. So for 2025, we looked at scenarios with 5% down and 20% down using a conventional mortgage. The affordability index for individuals with 5% down was 65. And what that indicates, any number below 100 says that we are not affordable or we are lacking affordability, that housing cost is outpacing income. And now if you increase the down payment to 20%, obviously you generate a better result. And the affordability index is 82 for 2025. Looking at the chart behind us, very bottom line housing affordability index in black, you can see 22, 23, 24, and 25 if you want to look at the trend. In comparison, I think it's better to look at the transition from 2023 to 2025. 2024 in particular had numbers that were skewed a little bit by the median income figure. If you look at that trend in 2023, we see median income at $100,900. That actually dipped in 2024 down to $90,200 before increasing in 25 to $106,100. That $90,000 figure is a little bit of an outlier. It's based on HUD's methodology for calculating median income. Speaking speculatively, I don't think there was like a dramatic shift down and then back up in income over the course of those 2 years. So what we're seeing if you transition from 23 to 25 is a gradual but steady improvement in the affordability index. We have not reached a point of balanced affordability, but we are closer to that than we were previously. What's the narrative behind this? What's driving this change? And what it boils down to is, again, moderate and gradual improvement in several contributing factors, as well as greater stability and predictability. We have seen moderate gains in median price, as Mandy discussed. Median price is down a little bit. That's more to do with increasing inventory and lower price points than it is to do with a decline in value in any given home. There's more inventory in the lower price points. It means more consumer choice. Rates have improved. At the end of 2024, national average for a 30-year fixed was sitting at 7.07%. At the end of 2025, that number had improved to 6.13%. I would also like to note that starting in about September of 2025 through today, we've seen a relative stability in interest rates that is unprecedented since before COVID. People kind of know what rate they're going to get going in. We're not seeing these huge swings up and down week to week, month to month, and day to day, at least relative to the last few years. In addition, property taxes, specifically for single-family primary residences, have, on average, declined in Missoula, resulting in lower monthly payments. I'd like to emphasize that that's not universal across all property types, but if you're buying a house that you're going to live in, statistically speaking, your taxes are probably lower this year than they were last year. And then lastly, as discussed, an increase in income up to $106,100. More income, lower housing cost, better affordability. So we're trending in the right direction. We're not there yet, but we're seeing, like I said, gradual improvement, steady improvement, greater stability and predictability. And with that, I'll hand it off.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Good morning, everybody. Brent Wahlberg here. You usually hear about supply from me, so that's what I'm going to talk on. I sound like a little bit of a broken record. I feel like I've probably educated maybe 80% of the room here. But when we talk about housing supply, we are talking about sales, recent sales in the last 30 days compared to active available listings within that same price point. First slide that you should see behind me is our total market supply. And like our president Josh had mentioned, we've now added in extra layers so you can look at supply in the Sealy Swan, in Potomac, in Bonner, in East Missoula, West Valley, and other areas like that. What you're seeing here looks a little different than previous supply charts because this isn't a rolling 12-month average. This is a quarterly point in time. So the spikes is seasonality. Supply will increase and go up, kind of do this little up, down, up, down. So it's not as smooth as you've seen before, but the trend generally is the same. So what you're looking at on this is going back from 2014 forward to 2025. You see a pretty obvious thing that we talked about in previous housing reports. When we hit 2020, 2021, the COVID pandemic market, supply really bottomed out. And that was when we saw rapid acceleration in prices. Interest rates were very low, a lot of competition for properties. Now, what we've noticed in this last year is supply has really started to hit that kind of equilibrium point. If you want to hit a perfect point of supply in a residential real estate market, you want 6 months of supply. And I think it's a little tough to tell with the washout, but you see the different color, the different gradient there. That's kind of our normal range. If you have less than 3 months of supply, that's an undersupply market, which usually leads to competitive bidding, houses selling for over asking, rapid price acceleration. And if you go over that gradient line, especially over the dotted line of 12 months of supply, you start moving into a dramatic oversupply market. There's a couple gray hair veterans like me in the room here who worked through the bubble years, where we had as much as almost 30 months worth of supply, where we saw housing prices going down because lack of buyers, but a tremendous amount of options and availability. So right now we're at a point of about 5 months of total market supply. Last time we were there, that was fall of 2018, 2017 through 2018. So we're kind of in a pre-pandemic, couple years before pre-pandemic market. At that point, though, our supply was sliding down. And as you can see on the chart now, it's starting to climb up. The other thing that I noticed quickly was that supply for single-family detached housing was a little bit lower when you compare it to townhomes and condominiums. So we got forward to the next slide here. As you'd heard from Mandy, we had grabbed a couple of neighborhoods of example to talk about sales activity in relation to how much is sold versus what happened in the median sales price. So we want to take a quick look and see what is going on in the supply right now. We saw some pretty fascinating things. The Grant Creek, Butler Creek area, if you've got a home for sale right there, you're probably not really enjoying life because we've had no sales as of right now. This is a very recent number. This is a kind of a point in time as of when we put this report together. But kind of some fascinating things that we noticed was some of these areas where price points are a little bit more attainable or a little bit closer to our median sales price, like Lewis and Clark and Lolo, we see the supply is in an undersupply. So as Mandy had talked about earlier, buyers, we have an increase of buyer activity around more affordable, attainable price points relative to Missoula's market. And we're seeing in some of these neighborhoods, supply is tight. People are trying to get in there. It is a more competitive area. But Setupkane is a real fascinating look because the supply technically is an oversupply. Setupkane's median sales price in 2024 was $550,000, and now it's $520,000. But it was our strongest gaining and our highest volume area of sales volume. What's going on out in the Mullen Road? I live out that way. I think some of you in the room do as well too. It's one of our areas where we are still building quite a bit. Missoula, we are building quite a bit. We're adding both rentals and single family homes and townhomes and condos as well too. So supply is up, sales volume is up, and median sales price is stabilizing. We've heard about this before from like the National Association of Realtors. There's two ways that a market can really fix supply and level out sales data or level out median sales prices and open up housing to more people. And one of those ways is by building housing. And so in areas of town where we see more building activity happening, it's no surprise that we see supply go up, median sales price go down, but volume stay strong. Okay, and then finally, our last slide from me is our supply gap and absorption rate by price range. And this again just affirms a lot of the stories that you've heard already here today. And this talks about how Missoula is very much a split market. Notice, as Mandy had mentioned before, 600,000 and under in Missoula it's in the normal range, but you're kind of starting to flirt with undersupply. People are trying to get into housing at or under these price points. You see 4.3 months of supply, 3.05 months of supply, and 3.56 months of supply in that 150 to 300 and every $150,000 step up. Suddenly you go 600,000 to $1 million in those next two step ups, and we're kind of right at the midpoint, right? We've got 6 months of supply, we've got 7.82 months of supply, and then what happens when we hit $1 million plus? Our supply goes to 17.83 months. So that is a market where we have a tremendous, almost a triple the amount of inventory compared to buyer activity. So we see this market where we've got heavy, tight activity at around or below our median price point, good balance, a little bit above it. And then once you really start to climb, you start to totally flip the script here, and you're looking at something where your absorption rates are tremendous oversupply. If you look at active listings right now, 22%, so over 1 in 5 of active listings in Missoula are in that $1 million plus market. That's our most distressed market in terms of supply and probably pricing activity. And with that, Paul, you're up.
Thanks, Brent. Let's look at the other aspect of supply. We're talking about future supply, how we're going to create new homes. And one way to do that is look at subdivision approvals for 2025. The subdivision process is divided into 2 distinct stages. Most of us are familiar with the preliminary plat approval phase, and that's where the project is proposed. And it'll ultimately end up in front of the city council or the county commissioners for a decision. That's when you become aware of it, you hear of it. When you actually see the subdivision go in is when the final plat infrastructure has been installed. So that's when you see it. And so what did we see in 2025? And what did we hear about? Well, we saw a significant decline, 88% down in subdivision approvals in the when we combine the city and county total. That's interesting because we had a ramping up in 2023 and 2024 and a sharp decline in 2025 for the actual new subdivisions that were given the preliminary plat approval for residential lots. And we also saw a decline in the actual final plats, actual lots created that are now ready and buildable, where all the new homes can go on. We saw a 61% decline last year in that in the final plat statistic. So subdivisions are down both in the city and county at the preliminary plat approval phase and the final plat filing phase. On to the next, building permits. Some good news is we saw a 12% increase in building permits across the board in city county total. Pretty stable from 2024 numbers, up from 2023, and significantly down from 2021. 2021 was really the banner year in Missoula. Look at this graph. Clearly, it stands out in the last 10 years of being when we built a lot of houses. What's interesting about that statistic, as we look at the growth policy that was adopted in 2024, 2024 in December 2024, so just on the cusp of 2025. In that growth policy, there's a deep dive on how many housing units we need, and they would point to a number closer to this 2021 number. We need that number, they say in the growth policy, for 10 to 15 years, then another bump, not increasing that number, but more than we're doing now for an extended period. And that will get us to what they call a stable housing number. And so it's an interesting data point. And I bring that up because we've often speculated on how many houses we needed to create. That's from the building industry, from the housing, from the realtors, and even from the city county government. How many houses do we need to create? And we've never really had a number. Well, I like that number that the city actually paid a consultant, an outside consultant from outside town to come up with that number. They put it in the growth policy. And so I like that number. And I think that's interesting. One last thing I'd point out here is the actual increase, the 12% increase in units, all came from the county. And we can actually find what project that was. That was that duplex project that's been built over by the Y. We have a sharp increase in duplexes. Super interesting. And really one project, one developer is doing that. So that just shows how kind of small of a community, small our market is, and small the development activity is that one developer can really push that number up or decide not to do something and the numbers go down and we have a lower year. So with that, I'll pass it off to Derek.
Thanks, Paul. So we'll talk about components of population change. So we'll start first with the two components are the natural population increase, that's births minus deaths, and then net in-migration, that's the number of people moving in versus the number of people moving out. So we'll start with the blue line here, which is the natural change rate. So that's the number of births minus deaths. Missoula's natural change rate has been increasing since its low in 2021 to 2022. You can see that little dip there. But since then, it's been driven by a little bit of a baby bump. Now, if you don't believe me, head down to the second floor here at the library and you'll see all of them there. So, so the data in here ends in 2024, but early indications have the 2025 number at around 500 more births than deaths. So that's sort of returning to where we were back in 2010. So Missoula will likely rank second in production, roughly 1,700 births. So we are very much in the business of producing Montanans here in Missoula. We are also doing a good job of keeping our older Montanans running. Missoula has had a pretty low to stable number of deaths with about 1,200 a year. So this pattern is not unique to Missoula. Pattern of higher birth rates and lower or steady death rates is kind of observed across most of Montana's major urban centers. However, Montana as a whole is seeing rates below replacement. So you could imagine areas like Polson, Eureka, Hamilton are seeing negative natural change rates. So we'll move to the more important part of population change over the last couple of years. That is the net in-migration. So that is just the number of people moving in, subtracted from the number of people who left Missoula. So we kind of returned to a normal range in 2024, but we kind of expect this to settle at sort of a higher level. This is going to be driven on what's known as a network effect. So it's kind of a simple idea. People move to Missoula from other areas. Those folks have out-of-state Missoula work, family, friend connections. So we'd expect the number of people to move here to be slightly higher than it was historically. So for example, when my son was born in 2024, there was generally nothing on this earth I could do to stop my mother from moving to Missoula. It took her just 6 months to move to where her latest grandchild lived. So with that, thank you. I'll turn it over to Julie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Pavlish, and I am the Operations and Program Director for Homeward, based here out of Missoula. We offer HUD-certified homebuyer education and counseling services throughout Western Montana. We see the direct impacts of these market conditions that we have been talked about so far today on our clients' journeys towards reaching their first-time home purchase. Last year, we saw almost 900 folks through our programs. And we are so proud to get to work closely with our other nonprofit partners to help our community members all along that continuum of housing. One of our close partners, the Missoula Housing Authority, tracks the data for the use of housing vouchers in the Missoula area. So a housing choice voucher, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, is a voucher that makes private market housing affordable for low-income families and individuals. Participants pay 30% of their income towards rent, and then the voucher helps cover the gap between that and the rental rate. To be eligible, applicants' households' income must be at or below 50% of our area median income, or roughly $43,000 for a family of 4 last year. So the housing voucher has a wait list, and once you are contacted on the wait list, an individual has 60 days to find a lease with an extension of 30 more days automatically if they need it. And last year, the average number of weeks or months that a voucher was on the street before finding a lease was 1.6 months. Over 95% of the individuals or families were able to find homes in that initial 90-day timeline. This is a marked increase in the number of successful home leases from the last few years. That's really exciting. MHA has also reported an increase in the number of households they were able to help last year through the Housing Choice Voucher program. So while we see the length of time that families are on the wait list vary based on current conditions that are out there, it does fluctuate. The two factors that really help decrease the time most community members are spending on that wait list were present last year. Shorter time to find a lease and an increased number of families being helped means a shorter time on the wait list. So that is a really positive change from the last few years that we've been able to see. On our next slide, I get to talk about one of the other vital programs that helps our community members of more modest incomes reach the goal of homeownership and through our local community land trust options. Front Step, our local and the oldest community land trust in the state, works to steward these unique and stabilizing opportunities for the Missoula community. As you can see on the slide, last year, 3 homes sold under the umbrella with a median home price of $257,028. That included 2 community land trust homes and 1 deed restricted home. There's a nuance there in those, but it's exciting to get to see both varieties represented. But the most exciting news you will see is for the year ahead, where we have an anticipated 27 new homes in the Rivard development coming to market starting this April. And while you can see here that last year, 150 Missoula households joined the Community Land Trust interest list, the interest in these homes is going to far outstrip the available number each year, but we look forward to this meaningful addition in 2026. So as we track these homes through time, last year was the first time that Front Step helped welcome a second-generation Community Land Trust homeowner to the Burn Street Commons. Their parents were part of the initial purchase in 2000, and after 25 years, their son moved back to Missoula with their family, and they were able to find a home that was affordable them to purchase in the same development. So now they have an affordable home for they and their family in our community. These opportunities are allowing home affordability to be intergenerational, which is a really exciting thing to see along with the growth of our community. So I'm going to turn it back over to Josh to talk more about the rental data.
Thanks, Julie. I'm Josh Plum, business development with Plum Property Management here in town to talk on the market rate residential rental data. So our rental data is compiled from local property management professionals and other realtor members who voluntarily report each month. This year, our reported unit count increased by about 25% over 2024, which means we're working with a larger and more substantive size of rental doors. That strengthens the reliability of the report and makes the numbers better. We've also updated the format this year for reporting. So the data slide now combines vacancy and the average rents into one interactive tool. So you can sort date range, unit type, and bedroom count, allowing you to drill and track trends over time by unit type. That improvement gives us better visibility to what's actually happening in different layers of the rental market. So in 2025, fewer new multifamily units launched compared to 2024, and those projects are absorbing, but more slowly than what we've been used to in the last 3 years. So we're seeing rent incentives and concessions being offered across multiple unit types in order to secure tenant leases. Even with that slower absorption in certain segments, overall vacancy remains very low by historical standards. And one of the clearest signals that we're seeing right now is price sensitivity. So the higher end 1 and 2 bedroom units in the $1,800 to $2,500 a month range are leasing more slowly. And any units under $1,500 have a low vacancy rate and are leasing very quickly. The larger amenity packages do not appear to outweigh pricing decisions, and tenants are often choosing the lower nominal rent, even when higher rents include utilities and amenities and some additional creature comforts. The demand continues to be the strongest in entry-level and rental workforce housing. So for the statistics, 1-bedroom multifamily saw a growth in rents from $1,182 to $1,246 a month, a 5.41% growth year over year. 2-bedroom multifamily continued for the 3rd year in a row to have a double-digit increase, 11.4% from $1,491 to $1,661. And 3-bedroom single-family homes actually stabilized in price in 2025. So average rents were $2,228 with only a growth of 0.13% year over year. So a lot of stabilization in the single-family market. On the landlord ownership side, operating costs remain a significant pressure point. Insurance premiums are up, labor and materials have increased, property taxes continue to rise. One of our reporting partners reflected an average multifamily tax impact of approximately $70.16 per unit per month between 2024 and 2025. That type of increase materially affects developers bringing projects and long-term housing stability for tenants to maintain housing. As another reminder, as you're probably sick of hearing, the Department of Revenue's long-term rental tax verification window is open until March 1st. So make sure if you have multifamily units, mobile home parks, long-term rentals of any size and shape, make sure to get that done. And finally, we're always looking to expand our data set. So if you're a private landlord or a housing provider and would like to participate, we welcome the involvement. The stronger the participation, the better the data and the better informed our committee and community can be next year. And to Mandy.
This slide comes from Realtor.com, and it's based on search activity, not actual moves or sales. It's measuring where people are searching for homes online, where they are located when they're searching for homes online, when they're looking in Missoula listings. And what we see here is that we continue to see some of the same areas that like to look in Missoula. Phoenix, Arizona is always a leader. Denver, Colorado. This year, we saw Salt Lake City jump into the running ahead of Seattle, Washington. If we look at Montana's towns and cities who are looking in Missoula, we see that change to Helena and Ravalli County this year. Okay. Each year, the Missoula Organization of Realtors gathers practitioners and strategic partners to analyze and report on data across areas that can affect housing in our area. The goal is to make this information useful, whether that's for industry professionals, nonprofit organizations, housing advocates, or anyone working to better understand our local housing landscape. This data supports planning, grant writing efforts, and informed decision-making across our community. In 2025, we saw a continued stabilization of the market with the 2nd year of an increase in closed sales, more negotiating happening for buyers, and a slight adjustment to the median price point. In market rate housing, we're seeing a supply in a more normal range than we've seen in a long time. Affordability looks a little better this year with a combination of lowering interest rates and in some cases, lower property taxes. This gives buyers more choices and opportunities to secure housing. We continue to have a lack of usable inventory in the lowest price bands in our area. This leaves many people unable to afford a market rate home. We will see more affordable options hitting the market in the form of land trusts this year. We need to see more. Housing in this segment of the market can provide homes for those that are not able to secure housing at market rate price points. Thank you for attending today. We've shown a small snapshot of the full housing report that's online at MissoulaRealEstate.com. There you can interact with graphs and information across the social, sales, rental, and supply dashboards. We will be sharing a QR code to access the data as well. And a video of this presentation and a copy of our slides will be up on the site soon. And with that, we're going to move to our Q&A.
Thanks again for coming, everybody. We have time for a few questions. So we have a couple people with microphones. Please state your name, keep your questions in the form of a question and a single question, and avoid statements, please, so we can get to as many people as possible. Over here, Shen.
I'll hold the microphone for you.
In the lower price point on the for sale single family, are you able to determine if those are new homes to the market or existing product resale? Is there a distinguishment you could make on that?
You're asking. Oh,
Mandy.
She's asking if homes in the lower price points were new to market, like new construction versus older home stock that we've seen. We did see a good influx of lower priced homes hit the market in 2025. But primarily the data that I saw was that we saw more older homes selling this year.
I'll hold it for you.
Cool. Hi, I had a question around the rental market. I know you mentioned that 1 and 2 bedrooms, the price is still generally increasing, but for 3 bedrooms, it's stabilizing. Is that having to do with the number of 3-bedroom rentals that are entering the market comparatively to 1 to 2 bedrooms? Or yeah, I'm just curious about like the development of those different kinds of rentals and how that's affecting how much the rent is going up versus stabilizing.
So 3 bedrooms as a market segment, whether it's new construction on market that are causing those to stabilize. Well, when I said 3 bedrooms, we're talking primarily about 3-bedroom single family home housing stock. So totally different product than single family and multifamily. But I think it really does tie into the affordability, right? So those more affordable units that are smaller, that can be shared possibly, are still more desirable at the moment than upgrading and spending more money on a single family home. And I think that's anecdotally part of the answer to that question.
I know that you don't specifically break out demographics, but I want to ask, last fall, National Association of Realtors kind of made headlines when it released some information saying first-time home buyers are up to 40 years old for the first time. And then now I'm seeing some information from Redfin with Business Insider reporting that maybe that's closer to 35. Can you give me any kind of a back of the envelope sort of feel about who are these first-time home buyers, and are we in kind of that mix? Is it different in Missoula, or is that something that we just don't have data for?
Yeah, so good question, Dennis. I would say I don't know if we've got that type of granular data when it comes to Missoula compared to what you see on the national perspective. We are continuing to see projections that the average age of a first-time home buyer is going to continue to stay around where it is. There isn't some big beacon in the future that it's going to go way down, and that the average age of a move-up buyer is going to remain in the 60s probably for a little while here. So unfortunately, I mean, as a practitioner, I can think anecdotally, I can talk about very similar observations of instances like that as well too. But I don't know unless if actually Julie might have a little bit of stuff on her side. So I can speak on the national side, but Julie, give us some local stuff here.
Thanks, Brent. So I ran this data in preparation just in case. So in 2020, the average age for one of our clients coming in to take our class was 33 for the first-time homebuyer class. In both 2024 and 2025, it had jumped to 36. And so while we're not at the national ages of that 40, we are seeing an increase in the age of our students coming into class.
The interest that you're seeing consistently from the Phoenix area in searches, I'm assuming it's snowbirds, but is that what you're finding, or is it just people fleeing Phoenix?
Yeah, hard to say. I think since we have had this, I think we've had this for 3 years now, maybe 4 years. It has continually been Phoenix has been the top. I've provided this analysis for across the state. And unfortunately, Missoula, Phoenix loves all of Montana, not just us. So if you go to Kalispell Whitefish, if you go to Helena, if you go to Bozeman, if you go to Billings, if you go to parts of Idaho, Phoenix really, really wants to be in the mountains and the pine trees. They look at a lot of real estate there. So maybe there's some sort of connective bond, but unfortunately, we don't have the ability for data to track like how many people from the Maricopa County moved to Missoula County. Years ago, we used to be able to get that a little bit with IRS tax data. When people file their taxes, their primary would go from Arizona to Montana. So we'd be able to track that, but that's unfortunately data that's not available anymore. So this is our best bet that we've got.
Any further questions that I see in the room?
Thank you. I noticed you didn't mention anything about the class of buyers, the institutional buyers, as opposed to people buying their own single family residence. Do you have any information on the phenomenon that we may or may not have seen on institutional investor buyers?
Again, with buyer data, we don't have an ability to track if it was an individual buyer or an institutional corporate type buyer. I've in my personal business and in around the room with other practitioners, it has not been a topic of conversation. We've not really seen that in Missoula. But again, that's anecdotal stories. So the challenge of data reporting sometimes in Montana is MLS sales records is between two parties, and sometimes listing agent doesn't totally know the source of the buyer's agent, if it's an individual, if it's a LLC purchase, but it's still just people buying in a trust or something. But I will just say on an anecdotal point and area-wide conversation point, we have not seen an influx of institutional buyers or anything that's greatly influencing the market at all.
I would add one thing to that on the rental side. There are a couple institutional developers for multifamily properties here in Western Montana, but the majority of landlords remain as Montanans here in Western Montana. All right. Thank you, everybody. Oh, we got one more?
We got a question in chat. Are wages ever taken into consideration in relation to the housing and affordability in Missoula to not just discuss affordability, but attainability? You repeat that one? Yes. Are wages ever taken into consideration in relation to the housing and affordability in Missoula to not just discuss affordability, but attainability?
Yeah, I guess that's a tricky one to respond to. I would need to know how you would define affordable, how you would define attainable. the short answer is that, yes, of course, we're taking incomes into consideration when we look at our affordability index. It's impossible to create that number without incomes being factored in. So to answer this individual's question, I would have to respond with a series of questions of my own. But yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. We're taking income into consideration. And regardless of the term affordable, attainable, which you use, what I can tell you is that relative to the cost of housing as a monthly payment, that incomes are catching up. They're not where they need to be, but income is closer to where it needs to be for a home to be affordable or attainable.
Thanks everyone for coming today. We're going to hang out up here for a little bit for questions if anybody was too embarrassed to ask with a microphone. But thanks all for coming and have a wonderful, beautiful day.